Ever play the game Telephone? Momonga/eins all gown. As you wish, my lord. Demiurge answered me with enthusiasm. To begin, there was once a village called Elwold within the Baharuth Empire that I felt would be a prime location for an outpost and staging ground for Nazarick. It was both far enough away from the main cities of the Empire that it wouldn't receive many visitors, yet close enough to gather an army around in order to launch a rapid invasion of the two cities nearby. Additionally, the forest to the west of the village could be used to hide our buildup of forces, while the lumber gathered from the forest could be used to expand the outpost if needed. As Demiurge said this, I felt immensely confused. What invasion? I only wanted Demiurge to gather information about the Baharuth so that I could know if there were any potential threats to Nazarick along with understanding of the area. At best, the scouts might even discover information about more players in the world, with a few of my friends possibly being among them. Was Demiurge assuming that I wanted to take over this world? But the build-up was only Phase 2 for the village. Phase 1 began with your permission of my plan to acquire materials to restock Nazarick's own limited supplies for production. Thinking back on this, I recalled that initial discussion I had with Demiurge. Following that, he informed me that he had been making good headway into his project with the animals he acquired. When he said animals, did he actually mean humans? Why didn't he just say humans in the first place? Utilizing the humans that were already residents within the village as a resource, I enacted an efficient system where the humans would be skinned of their flesh for the creation of scrolls along with limbs and such for sustenance of our laborers and to feed our humans. Following this, various healing spells were used to undo any damage and allow for multiple harvests of their bodies. With our efficient method, we were able to, on average, harvest 12 times a day from a single human. Another positive effect that the multiple flayings had is that it reduced our livestock's resistance. Demiurge explained with satisfaction. But why specifically humans? Wouldn't cows and such be slightly more efficient considering that they have a greater amount of mass in comparison to the average person? I questioned my subordinate while ruminating on the thought that it would be much simpler and draw less attention to acquire cows compared to humans. Demiurge smiled, and I couldn't help but wonder if he already assumed that I had another master plan in place. I tried working up the courage once to explain to the archdevil that I didn't have any plan in place, but he immediately assumed that it was another one of my master plans to try and test his loyalty. After that, I ended the attempt and gave up on trying to convince him otherwise. And that was the last time I tried that. This decision was reinforced by the thought that I'd likely disappoint all of my NPCs if I didn't act like the powerful genius that they believed I was. That genius which I faked also made it so that they couldn't predict any of my actions without assuming that it fell into said master plan. Thank God that I was decent enough at going with the flow and bullshitting my way through their assumptions. Of course, cows and such were initially considered until I realized that the only creature more prevalent and easily replaceable than others were humans. They also came with the added bonus of being more adaptable to other uses than normal livestock. For instance, having an array of human test subjects to study curses would deepen your understanding on the method to possibly cure the curse that you have been debilitated by. After all, it was one of the reasons that you've associated so much with Kasha Blanc since she has a potential method to dispel it. That assumption raised my non-existent eyebrows. Demiurge, my time spent with Kasha wasn't because I expected that she had anything to fix my issue. It's because she's a kindred spirit that I've come to see as a friend. And even if that were the case, I doubt that she can do anything to fix my situation as much as I have tried. And try I did. When Kasha first told me that I was afflicted by a curse, something I didn't initially consider since I assumed my problem was just a feature of my race. But looking into it, for the lore of Yggdrasil, it made sense. From there, I had been trying a few small attempts to fix the issue. I've used Maximize Magic, Dispel Magic, Maximize Magic, Dispel Curse, both the normal and greater versions of the spells, and a few powerful items in Nazarick's treasury to remove curses, but I'd been met with dead ends every time. There was always my shooting star ring, but that was an unrecoverable resource that, if a failure, meant that I'd have wasted it for nothing. The only other treasure in Nazarik's possession that was a possibility is one of the 20 in our possession, Mourning of the Mystic Goddess. It had the ability to remove any status effect and undo any debilitation on a single user. It took the form of a painting on a large golden leaf with a bestial woman in white looking at a burning tree. With it being a 20, Mourning of the Mystic Goddess had only one use. I hadn't even utilized it on Shaltir because of that, since she had the possibility of being fixed through her death and resurrection. Even if that hadn't worked, I'm not sure if I would have used it on her. A large part of me says that I would have, but another part says that the 20 needs to be saved for myself or something even more dire. Either way, my slow loss of emotions is not enough to justify using it on myself. Regardless, please continue, I said, urging my subordinate to continue his report. Of course, my lord, Demiurge said with a bow. Through my study of curses, I came to the fascinating realization that creating chimeras would both add new methods of research and be useful to utilize as troops for Nazarik's conquest. I saw Demiurge perform that ominous habit of pushing his glasses up his nose before grinning. Yet, outright assault was not our only means of conquest. Your study of the Kitsune's method of disguising herself among the local populace was enlightening. I realized that we can take over an entire city without shedding a single drop of blood by capturing and replacing the highest officials of the city of Fieldworld. As it was a trial phase that you no doubt had wanted to see take root, I made certain that it all went without issue or discovery, at least until Kasha found out. And you came to this conclusion just from my interacting with Kasha? I asked while wondering what logic it took for Demiurge to reach that conclusion. At this point, I couldn't help but wonder what he would think if I were to just conjure a spoon into my hand and toss it to his feet without a word. Would he think that I wanted to dig a massive quarry with slaves? Not just from that, my lord, but also through Albedo's initial idea of capturing and replacing the Veyron sisters with doppelgangers. I glanced over to said succubus, who beamed a smile to me with pride. While this train of logic was a little ridiculous, I had to admit that it was certainly a clever idea. If I was planning a conquest of the Baharuth Empire, it would both delay any thoughts of the country being under assault while also weakening their defenses from within. This isn't better. This is fucking worse. At least back home, the people in charge made things shittier because they were greedy. Here, your people are making things worse out of pure malice and sadism. All the while, you do nothing because you're either too chicken shit or too apathetic to care. As I thought on what Kasha had said to me before, I wondered if I would have even bothered trying to stop Demiurge from enacting this conquest fantasy of his if I didn't have Kasha hounding me about it. Truthfully, I don't think I'd have cared to act. When I had saved Kani village, I did so with nostalgia over Touch Me saving me when I most needed help. But now, none of the people living in the Baharuth meant anything to me. At least with Kani, I saw the villagers being slaughtered through scrying them. With the Baharuth Empire, I wouldn't see them, which also gave me less inclination to do anything about it. And even if I did personally get involved, they'd likely be nameless faces at that point who I might only spare a passing glance to. Perhaps Kasha was right. Humorously, both Nazarik and I might just be worse than the CEOs and presidents in charge of Earth. Before, I might have even felt upset and angry at the insult. Now, it was mild irritation at best. Yet, I took hold of that tiny, almost insignificant emotion, and tried to let it mean something slightly more. To allow those small embers of my former humanity to try and make me care about the random citizens more than the wishes of my subordinates. But I couldn't do it. When weighed against Nazarik, those random people meant nothing. The next option was to see it through a more logical mindset. Conquering the city of an entire empire would only bring unneeded attention down upon Nazarik. I was still in the dark about most of this world, with only the bits of information collected by my spies about the Baharuth and the mixture of information given to me by both Kasha and my spies about the Riastais. That still left the slain theocracy as an unknown, plus the few other countries that I've seen on the maps that had been acquired. Even if most of this new world was relatively weak in comparison to us, that didn't mean that there weren't those to be worried about. For instance, there were people who held a world item that had been used against Shiltir. That was instantly a great threat which could spell doom for Nazarick if ignored. I also felt some minute bits of anger at how they forced me to kill her. At least that was one emotion I could slightly keep a hold of. Another thing to be wary of was that Kasha would intervene if she discovered something like this. While the forces of Nazarick could subdue or even kill her if they were all sent at once to overwhelm her, I would lose too much. Many NPCs would be killed, and I would lose a friend. So, with those logical reasons set in my mind, they gave me reason to care and act. I had to protect Nazarick and everything that my friends had entrusted to me. From there, we had made decent headway into replacing the authority figures within Fieldwold, and likely would have been finished within the month until Kasha discovered it. Demiurge gave a bow. I apologize for letting such an event happen. I waved his apology away with my hand. You have no reason to apologize, Demiurge. You are as you were made. But now that you know, I would hope to not have any further repeats. I understand, my lord. And to begin with, while the initial idea for acquiring materials for Nazarick was admirable, I will request that you report to me what livestock you wish to use in the future so that I may give my approval on it. For now, start with actual livestock, like cows, or non-sapient animals for material acquisition. I ordered. Very good. I can formulate a list for livestock of your choosing within the hour. Demiurge answered obediently. Following that, you will need to inform me of when you leave Nazarick and where you might possibly go for both my approval and your protection. Kasha will kill you if she ever were to encounter you outside of Nazarick. I wish to ensure that has as little chance of happening as possible. In a way, I felt like this was the equivalent to grounding a child. If said child was an archdevil that could eviscerate an entire village without guilt or hesitation. Of course. I will not throw away my life after everything you had to endure to protect it. I will keep you aware of my comings and goings. The archdevil promised, filling me with relief. That is good to hear. I told him, which earned me a nod before I went into thought for a moment over how much extra work I now would need to do. Yet, I guess my pondering seemed too obvious as I heard Albedo's voice. My lord, is something troubling you? She asked, bringing me back to reality where my gaze fell upon the white-clad succubus as she came closer to my throne. It appears that she was concerned, not exactly. Just considering how complicated things seemed to be becoming. I gave a terse chuckle. It's slightly ironic that between my personas of Moman and Ainz Ulgaun, I originally wished that being Moman was more exciting since there wasn't anything interesting to fight as an adventurer, like a demon lord, only simple monsters. Now, as Ainz Ulgaun, my life has become interesting in the most annoying way possible. I mused to both Albedo and Demiurge. I see. Is there anything that I could do to possibly aid in relieving your burdens, my lord? Albedo asked as she approached my throne and took my free hand into both of her own. A caring expression filled her face and I felt a slight mixture of appreciation and amusement at her care, only marred with some guilt by the fact that much of her extreme devotion to me was due to the changing of her backstory I did as a joke. I appreciate your concern, but any burdens that I, as Ainz Ulgaun, have can only be handled by myself. The best help that you can do for me now is to see my orders through and continue your duties as overseer. I gently told her, making Albedo nod in turn. Of course. I will ensure your will shall be enacted, Lord Ainz. She promised with great conviction. Thank you, I said in gratitude. Now, the both of you know your orders. I hope to have detailed reports of Nazarick's current endeavors very soon. You are both dismissed. They both gave me a bow followed by, of course, Lord Ainz. Then, they left me, with Albedo giving me one final glance before exiting the throne room, leaving me to my thoughts once more. What did I want? If I ended up finding my friends in this world, what would I do next? Compared to Kasha, who wanted to altruistically make this world a better place, I couldn't hazard a guess as to my next move. My NPCs were under the belief that I wanted to conquer the world and were willing to help ensure that in any way possible. But that was what they wanted for me. It wasn't truly my own aspiration, just one foisted upon me. With little prompting, my mind went to Nabril taking up the hobby of painting. Perhaps, a minor future goal would be to see the NPCs of Nazarick grow beyond more than just their programming. To see them have some thoughts beyond only Nazarick. Even if my friends would be mostly horrified or embarrassed by their creations, I feel that they would appreciate the NPCs finding their own path in life. Future growth is an admirable goal to look towards. Perhaps, more goals would spread from that. But if I wanted to see that happen, I had to make certain that my subordinates didn't go out of control beforehand. Lucrute. I found myself waiting by campfire for a while after everyone had gone off to sleep. What started as a normal day for training quickly changed when Kasha suddenly had to leave in the afternoon. We spent some time training among ourselves as we wondered what she could possibly be doing. I found myself becoming very worried when we received a magical transmission from her through the spell message that she would be busy for the rest of the day. The four of us had wondered if something like the attack by the church in Rantel was happening again, but we couldn't be sure. Instead, we tried to busy ourselves with training to keep our minds off those lurking worries. None of them were relieved when the sun began setting and Kasha still hadn't returned. My fears only grew as the sun disappeared upon the horizon and the moon began rising in the night sky. Even after dinner, the others waited an hour or so before finally going off to sleep. Nina, like myself, was the only other holdout, but even she eventually succumbed to exhaustion. That just left me alone by the crackling fire as I maintained my vigil. Idly, I let a root grow from my hand until it was the size of a regular dagger of 7 inches. Then, I broke it off and spun the sharpened stake of a root in my hand before letting it get reabsorbed back into my hand. I did this a few more times as it was just something to do to pass the time while doubling as a training method in my control over the roots. But, midway through my 6th cycle of doing this, a golden flash appeared from the corner of my eyes and I looked to see Kasha. Yet, she lacked any of the playfulness she had earlier today. In its place was a woman who looked like all the joy had been sucked out of her. Quickly reabsorbing the root into my hand, I shot up from the log I'd been sitting on and quickly rushed over to my beautiful fox. And growing closer, I examined how off she looked. Her eyes were a dull orange instead of the setting suns they normally were or the glowing golden that she took on from time to time. In addition, her blonde hair wasn't held up in her usual ponytail and now fell loose on her shoulders and down her back while her golden furred ear fell low on her head instead of pointing up to the sky. Then there were her tails which were all low enough to almost touch the ground, opposite of the way they'd usually flow behind her high in the air. One could say that she was almost like a dog or wolf in the way that her mood could be determined easily by her tails. "Kasha, are you okay?" I asked softly. Her eyes met mine before she pulled me into a hug and buried her head into the crook of my shoulder. I quickly wrapped my arms around Kasha and held her. As we stood like this, I felt her form shaking as the area Kasha had buried her face into began to feel wet. She was crying. I stroked the back of her head and continued to hold her. My mind had a million questions going through it, but there was one that stood out. What happened to cause her this much grief? This question didn't leave my lips because I wasn't going to rush her for answers when she was in this state. So, I continued to stand where I was holding Kasha while letting her release whatever she had been bottling up. We stood this way for a while and I really couldn't tell for how long since all my focus was on my lover. Eventually, the shuddering stopped and Kasha pulled her face from my neck and I got to see her tear-streaked face. I rested my forehead against hers and gave her a reassuring smile. "I'm right here for you," I promised. "Can we go someplace private?" Kasha asked softly. "Wherever you want," I replied. My consent was all that she needed as we now stood in our usual spot in the copse. Gently, I moved us over to a tree and pulled Kasha down so that I rested with my back against the tree with her resting against my chest. Kasha didn't resist me as we did this. "Would you like to tell me what happened?" I gently prodded. "I had to see and fix so much horror." My beautiful fox whispered, making my eyes widen. What could Kasha have seen to give a demigoddess like her such a reaction? What did you have to see and fix, at a minimum? A whole village of men, women, and children who had their flesh repeatedly flayed off and healed. Worse than that, I witnessed a little girl and her grandfather that had been grafted together while cancerous growths grew and rotted off their merged form repeatedly. I had to kill them both and rip their forcibly conjoined bodies apart piece by piece before I could fix them. And that was only a few examples of the horrors that happened. My jaw dropped as I heard this. That was nightmarish. What could have possibly done something like that to those people? I have seen a lot of terrible things in my life. Unwanted children dying on the streets as they choked on their own blood, their ruined lungs gulping down air, causing further pain and damage while their suffering was prolonged for one more breath. Destitute men, women, and children banging on doors, begging to be let in from the cold that would freeze them to death in minutes. All the while, no one would offer them shelter, content with merely watching as they succumb to the elements. Only one single moment in my life has been worse than everything I saw today. As Kasha said this, she began hugging herself with her arms and tails. All the while, I had to wonder exactly what kind of life that Kasha had led even though she was royalty. Since, from just those descriptions alone, she had gone through what seemed like a hellish time long before coming to the Riastais. And considering what she saw for the past few hours that brought her to this state, what could be even worse than that? Do you really want to know? She replied, startling me as I realized, with some shame, that I had thought that question aloud. Yet, the possibility of knowing more about Kasha's past was tempting to hear. I just didn't want to satisfy my curiosity if it was at the cost of hurting her. Only if you feel comfortable with sharing it, I answered as I pulled her closer to me. For a few moments, there was only silence. Then, Kasha softly spoke with a guilty tone. The worst moment of my life was when I killed my dad. That admittance shocked me. From everything that she had said, and all the emotions of love she showed when recalling memories of her parents, I could never have expected her to say something like that. There had to be more behind it than just that. It seemed like the blonde demigoddess was taking a few moments to collect herself, then she continued, I was 13. At the time, I didn't have power like I do now, and Dad and I weren't with Mom or in the realm of foxes when it happened, we were too far away. The land we found ourselves in was a polluted hellscape, with its people only barely surviving under the rule of powerful and greedy tyrants. One needed special masks to breathe outdoors as the air was a toxic miasma thick enough to permanently blot out the sun and sky. Any water was a horrific poison that needed to be processed and purified before being drinkable, the only distributors of which were sold by those same tyrants. The cheap and affordable method was to utilize filters which only partially made the water drinkable enough to not kill you immediately if they weren't quality filters. The more expensive way was to buy fully purified water directly from the tyrants. My dad was my hero. There was never anything he wouldn't do to keep his little girl safe. Our funds were tight, yet he made just enough that he could either buy average filters for both of us or he could buy the purified water for one of us and the cheapest filters for the other. Guess which option he took? With how charitable Kasha had said he was when explaining how her parents met, it was easy to deduce the answer, he gave you all the purified water. I answered. Kasha curled up closer to me as I said this, and I could see her nails, even covered by gloves, cut into the revealed skin of her arms and draw golden blood before the scratches healed. I watched him waste away bit by bit, unable to do anything to help. He slowly grew a cough that led to him hacking out a mixture of blood and sometimes bits of shriveled flesh from his lungs or stomach. His body got weaker before eventually becoming permanently bedridden and racked with horrific pain that on certain days would leave him screaming until he was hoarse. Any method of healing him was impossibly expensive. And yet, he would tell me that everything was fine, that I needed the good water more than he did. This was in combination with watching his mind slip away as he hallucinated or mixed up past and present events. After enough days of watching him waste away in agony, I made up my mind and stole some sleeping drugs from a nearby pharmacy. Then, I mixed a lethal dose into a cup of my own purified water and gave it to him. After that, I held his hand and sat with him. I listened to him tell me how big I was getting. Then he told me my favorite bedtime story. I saw Kasha give a remorseful smile as tears filled her eyes. He may have stumbled, coughed, and forgotten a few pieces of the story, but he made it through his last retelling. I will always recall his last words to me: "Daddy's getting tired, kiddo. I love you, I'll see you in the morning." He never woke up after that. As Kasha said this, she looked back into my eyes, and I saw the immense amounts of guilt of a woman who tried helping her father in the only way she could. Why couldn't that stupid, stubborn, selfless man have just been selfish for once in his life? Capturing her lips with my own to hold anything further she might say, I broke the kiss and rested my forehead against her. Enough of that. Everything you've told me says that you loved your father and did the best you could with what you had. And it's obvious to tell that you meant the world to your father, just as he meant it to you. Enough so that he saw your life as that much more precious than his. Yet, even with my words, Kasha didn't look reassured or convinced, so I decided to change up the tactic. "Kasha, if you had to choose between your life and Nina's, who would why?" I didn't even get to finish as Kasha interrupted, "Nina." Then, her eyes widened in surprise as her brain processed what she said. While Kasha and Nina kept it as quiet as possible at the moment from the others, I've overheard Nina call Kasha Mom a few times when they thought no one could hear. And from the way that Kasha didn't refute it, I found it obvious that Kasha had adopted Nina and Taya as her daughters. Point proven. You'd instantly lay down your life to protect your daughter. It gives you a little more perspective on what your father was thinking. When I said this, Kasha quickly gained an expression of surprise and cocked her head in question. "How did you know?" she asked, making me smile. "I tend to notice things, my beautiful fox. And I've overheard Nina call you Mom once or twice. And for being a recent parent, you are doing an amazing job at it. And that makes me confident that whenever we get married and have some more kids, that you'll be a natural there as well." As I said this, I easily pictured the pair of us sharing the rest our lives together. Well, technically it would just be my life. I'm completely positive at this point that Kasha is likely immortal. Compared to my mortal life, she's going to be around long after my body becomes little more than dust in the wind. But until that day, I'd do everything right now to keep her happy. Thankfully, that last statement got a small smile from my beautiful fox. Technically, for foxes at least, we'd already be married since we did the deed. As my instinctual side fully considers you to be my mate, and since foxes usually mate for life while kitsune always do, well. Wow. That was eye-opening to say the least. It did slightly explain why that one kitsune threatened me after Kasha and I had sex for the first time. But it did make me happy to know that our feelings for one another were never going to change. At the same time, that is good to hear, but I can't help feel a little disappointed. I admitted, earning a questioning look from Kasha, likely a kitsune or two that was probably hiding in the area the urge to murder me. "And why might that be?" Kasha asked with a neutral tone. "Because if the most beautiful woman in the world is to get married, then she deserves an amazing ceremony that truly shows off how beautiful she is, not just some simple lovemaking in the bushes. Following that, she'll need a feast in her honor. I can't let my princess have anything less than that." My answer elicited a blush followed by a smile from Kasha as her eyes gained a familiar shine to them. "And would this be your proposal to me right now?" she asked with a slowly returning playful tone and a sniffling of her nose as she wiped her eyes. "Not yet. If I were to propose to you, it needs to be the proper moment. Besides, I'm fairly certain that the others would see it as too soon," I explained, earning a giggle. Logically, I see your point and agree with it. But instinctually, she then unexpectedly cupped my crotch with her hand. "Your dick is my permanent property," Kasha warned with a straight face until she couldn't maintain the seriousness anymore as a grin quickly marred it, followed by her breaking out into laughter. By the time she let go, both of us were filling the cops with our laughter and I felt happy to see that Kasha's mood was rising. gently fondling her ears. I gave her a grin. If a goddess lays down her divine commandment like that, then who am I to disagree? I teased back. That earned me a kiss from the foxy demigoddess. Thanks for helping to cheer me up, Kasha said in gratitude before she gained a slightly somber look, but even so, I've still never fully gotten over the guilt of what I did. Maybe, if I had tried harder in finding a solution, he wouldn't have died? I shook my head and brushed some of Kasha's golden hair from her eyes. One thing I learned early in my career as an adventurer is this: you can't always save everyone. You've got to move past what you could have done and focus on what you can do now. For instance, you stopped whatever it was that tortured those villagers and helped them. How did you find out about this happening, anyway? Some of my people found a survivor of the initial attack after he managed to run away into the great forest of Tob. From there, I was informed about it and learned that it was the work of a bunch of former demons, emphasis on former. That was not good at all. The only places I've ever heard about demons is the stories told of dark practitioners of magic who summoned them to do their bidding. That was the most common of stories. Others were of how they could come into being all on their own. Regardless of the methods, one constant connection between all these stories was that demons were evil and cruelty incarnate. To hear that a bunch of demons assaulted a village like that was a bad omen. But they're all gone now, right? I asked with worry evident in my tone. Kasha noticed this, gently took my hand in hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. It should all be taken care of after everything I did today, she assured me with a serious tone, filling me with a needed relief. Albedo. Sitting in front of Demiurge with a neutral expression, I considered how the archdevil had forced my love to beg the whore to spare his life. At first, I was immensely angry at the absolute travesty that Demiurge caused, but then, I considered everything I knew about the Floor Guardian as his overseer. And what I knew is that Demiurge didn't make stupid mistakes. Aside from my love and myself, he's probably the most intelligent being within Nazarick. And as he and I were sent off by my love to fulfill his orders, I was given time to think. He was competent, and even with my continued disappointment in how my love had to protect him, there was only a single factor that was hard to fit into any plan both he and I might make. The fox whore. Everything just led back to her. And that was beyond unacceptable. My love called her a friend, but I knew that couldn't be true. She is just trying to trick my love by manipulating his misplaced feelings for the supreme beings that abandoned both him and Nazarick. But my love knows better, I know he does. The whore has to be put in line, especially because she was forcing my love to delay his plans for conquest with her threats and mere presence. My love deserves the world, and everything else within it. Any who stood in the way of that had to be punished for standing in my love's way. But that would have to wait until Nazarick had the means to accomplish this. Thankfully, my love has confirmed that the whore has adopted the Veyron sisters fully as her daughters. My love has said to end all attempts to kidnap the sisters, which told me that he was already aware of the ongoing attempts, but understood that they wouldn't work due to the forces being utilized in them. Obviously, he wanted us to perform any plan with agents that were stronger than simple demons and doppelgangers. But assembling a team for that would take some time. They had to be perfect, since we'd only get one chance. Albedo, after our talk with Lord Ines, I've ruminated on what we were told. And through that rumination, I've come to a few conclusions, one of which is that we must move our initial plans of conquest further away from the Re-Estize Kingdom and Baharuth Empire. This is due to both being monitored by Kasha Blanc. As Demiurge said this, my eyes narrowed in displeasure. How can one single woman give pause to and delay Lord Ines's plans of conquest? With the entirety of Nazarick at his beck and call, Lord Ines should be able to crush any resistance she might give. I'm aware that we may lose some of our forces in the process, but it is a risk that should be taken to remove the potential threat to Nazarick before she can establish herself. I questioned with frustration evident in my tone. I'm absolutely certain that Lord Ines is aware of something that would make such an assault be to our detriment. Because of that, we must build up our forces until suitable enough to outweigh such a risk. Demiurge answered, doing little to improve my feelings on the matter, This is in addition to retooling the plan for Nina Veyron. Now that interested me, and what idea might you possibly have? I have had my spies watching the girl day and night, and they have discovered that quite a few suspicious animals in the area. Animals, mind you, that never leave the area and are always watching Nina Veyron and the 3 other humans she's part of a group with. Of current count, there are 12 of these animals in total that stay around the group. I explained. That is extremely useful in helping to formulate a plan. I have also considered that we should utilize the combined might of the Pleiades instead of the agents that we've been using prior. I gave a nod of approval to this. All that leaves us is for the right opportunity to enact the plan. I actually have a few supplements that can be used to aid the Pleiades. I'll need some time to arrange for something suitable. Your aid would be helpful in this, and it would help to make up for the embarrassment that you put Lord Ines through. Of course. Then, Demiurge pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose while grinning. On that note, I would be appreciative if you would be willing to aid me in a new plan of mine to support Lord Ines. I wish to hear this plan before I give any answer. I replied. While I was immediately interested in any way of supporting my love, I was dubious of what Demiurge would want my assistance with. With how Lord Ines spoke of his moment persona earlier, I understood immediately his main issue. When he initially established the adventurer identity, it was to cultivate a reputation that would aid him in his great plan. Not for lack of trying, any enemies that he's fought besides Shiltir have barely aided that reputation growth. But what if he was given a great enemy, like a demon lord, to fight and defeat? I smiled at the plan being formulated. And where is it that I come into this? I asked. We need someone to play the role of a demon lord for this plan to come to fruition. As it would be an unwise choice for me to leave Nazarick due to current events, I feel the next best member of Nazarick who can competently play the part is you. As he told me this, I considered the request. There was some other reason that Demiurge wanted me specifically to do this compared to his other subordinates beyond just my competence. The only question is what that reason must be. Because it certainly wasn't to my benefit. One obvious reason would be due to Demiurge's original failed operation. He'd likely use me as a scapegoat in case the plan fails, lessening the burden of blame on himself. But that shouldn't be the only reason, it's too simple for him. While I had half a mind to refuse the request, I deliberated over how I could maneuver whatever hidden plan being schemed to my benefit. An obvious positive to my participation would be the direct benefit it would give to my love. A greater positive than that would be the appreciation and gratitude my love would give me. I can already imagine the compliments he would say to me. But that was the bait now, wasn't it? My love for Momonga versus whatever potential risk I might face with Demiurge's machinations. And I was willing to take the bait, since he wasn't the only demonic being in Nazarick that could come up with a plan. I gave him a simple smile before putting on an act for him. Absolutely, Demiurge. If it's something that would aid my love, then I'd do anything to make sure it succeeds. I answered. This earned a grin from Demiurge. Excellent. With you on board, my plan should take 3 to 4 weeks to perfectly set up for the adventurer moment to take center stage. Kasha. I found myself having another dream again. I was back home in the apartment that Dad and I shared together after Mom was taken back to her realm. And I remember this moment very well. It was just after I had stolen sleeping pills from the pharmacy. Opening the door to the apartment, I stepped through the threshold and into the decontamination spray, waiting for the beep to tell me it had finished. Then, receiving the industrial-sounding beep, I pulled off the rebreather from my face that had done little to block the stench of the toxic smog that had filled the streets outside for the past few days. Putting it onto one of the hooks on the wall next to the doorway, I unbuttoned my mom's former keen cloak and hung it onto the wall next to the rebreather. Following this, I let my golden tail unwrap from around my waist and felt relief as I was able to finally stretch it out after keeping it tightly in that position for so long. At the same time, I took the dull red beanie off of my head and allowed my ears to stand up straight like they were naturally predisposed to. With a shake, I pulled off my boots and inspected my body for any possible contamination. This humorously reminded me that I had been quite developed for my age. Had to blame Mom's genes on that one, yet, that was the only funny thing I could take note of in this memory. I still had the bag of pills in hand, and I could hear Dad wetly coughing as it was soon followed by groans of pain. The coughing had been growing worse, and it was getting so hard for Dad to keep anything solid down. And then there was the growing stench rolling off of him, a stench that I could smell the moment I entered the door. Lead, something like a mixture of chlorine and rotten eggs, and multiple scatterings of other heavy metals. Looking from the bag in my hand, to the doorway leading to my small room that Dad now rested in instead of me. He had been argumentative over taking the mattress in my room, but as he grew sicker, it had been easier to get him to finally agree to my requests. So fucking selfless, even as he was dying. Why couldn't life have been kinder to one of the few people that wasn't a selfish piece of shit in this world? But that was neither here nor there. It was too late for that now. Walking over to the small kitchen built into the wall, I pulled out a cup from one of the cabinets, and a knife with a flat end from another. 2 ingredients down, 2 more to go. Walking to the fridge, I pulled out one of the unopened bottles of water. If there was any small gift I could give him, then Dad would get water that I hadn't drank from just yet. I closed the fridge and went back to the counter before setting the water down. 3 ingredients down, 1 to go. Opening the bag in my hand, I pulled out the blue bottle of sleeping pills and twisted the cap off the bottle and poured out a large handful of the white tablets onto the counter and took up the knife before using the flat end of the blade to start crushing the tablets. I did it for a while until I had a white powder on the counter in front of me. Once finished, I began scooping up the large amount of powder in my hands and dumped it into the cup until the power was finally gone. Take 1 pill, and you'd clock out for 3 to 4 hours. Take 2, almost half a day. Take more than 5, and you're gonna die. That last part was a little rhyme some took to using due to how prevalent suicide was these days. This was just one of the easier methods. But before I went to unscrew the cap of the bottle, I hesitated. At that time, my mind was wondering if I should go through with this. Maybe there was some other way? I know that the small jobs I'd been getting since Dad got sick hadn't paid much, but I also knew that there were some more unsavory jobs that I've been trying to avoid which paid a lot more. I was a smart girl. I had skills, and I wasn't exactly unaware of my appearance. Maybe I could make enough money to get some meds that could buy a little more time before it was too late. Then, I could look at trying to get him an actual doctor. His symptoms had skyrocketed last night as his skin and eyes slowly began yellowing. I had been desperately trying to find any way to reverse this, but there was nothing. What I learned later on was that there was no possible way to fix Dad at this point. His liver had been in the process of failing for a week now. It was a simple miracle that it had held out for this long after all the chemicals and heavy metals his body had constantly been battered with for years now. He needed a new liver along with dialysis. Neither of which we could afford. But I kept believing that there might be a way. I was just a teenager that didn't want to lose her dad. Looking at that cup of powder, I was about to reconsider my decision and pour the cup into the sink until I heard Dad scream in agony. He always tried to hide the screaming from me if he thought I was home. But then, the next thing I heard just caused me to freeze. Nori. Where are you? Where am I? This isn't our room. This isn't our home. He was going through another of his episodes. This time, he couldn't remember that we had moved out of our old apartment. And he still thought that Mom was around. I gritted my teeth and scrunched away the stinging at the corner of my eyes as I set the cup back onto the counter, unscrewed the cap of the bottle, and poured it into the cup. Following this, I used the blade of the knife to stir the crushed sleeping pills into the water until it looked like the powder had fully dissolved into the water. Picking up the cup once more, I slowly trudged towards the closed door to Dad's room and stopped with my hand reaching towards the steel handle. Taking a shuddering breath, I wiped my eyes on my sleeves and did my best to put a smile onto my face. Then, I finally opened the door and entered the room to see Dad laying on the mattress, sweat pouring from his jaundiced skin. But at my approach, he turned his head towards me and put on a wide smile while trying to hide the immense pain he was going through. "Pa Kasha. You're getting so big. Then again, your birthday is tomorrow and you only turn 8 once, kiddo." I hid my urge to start crying as I heard how enthusiastic he was. "Why yeah, I'm excited, Daddy. I can't wait to see what you've got for me," I replied, playing along as I approached his bed and sat on the floor next to him. It was easier to play along during one of his episodes than try and explain where and when we are. Dad looked around me a bit before meeting my gaze again. "You don't have Meepo with you? You two are inseparable usually. Don't tell me my little girl is growing up already?" "I'm still your little girl, Daddy," I said with a sniff before using my tail to gently grab Meepo off the shelf near the door before bringing him to my free hand. "See, Meepo's just been watching over you, that's all. He's been very good at H's job." Dad was sudden racked with a coughing fit before he wiped his mouth with his sleeve, the wet red stain smeared across it showing how badly this fit was. Looking to the cup in my hand, I swallowed the lump in my throat and got closer to him. "Here, Daddy, doctor, drink this to help with the coughs." He nodded and I helped to pour the drink in his mouth until he had drained half the cup. Then, he pushed it away. "Thank you," he said. It didn't matter that he hadn't finished it. He already drank enough to overdose. Now, I just had to wait. "Why kiddo, if you had a birthday wish, what would it be?" he asked me with a smile. I wanted to start sobbing as I felt my smile waver slightly. Don't you know, if I tell you, then the wish won't come true?" I replied as I hid my eyes in my hand and squeezed them shut to stop tears from leaking out. Maybe it might come true if you do this time," he playfully said back. My wish is that you would tell me a bedtime story," I answered as I wiped my eyes and looked at Dad's smiling face, unaware or uncaring of his approaching end. "Oh, that's an easy wish to make come true. I know, how about I tell you your favorite one?" I couldn't trust myself to talk, so I just nodded. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess of a far-off land. She had Trav. Another coughing fit erupted from his mouth as I moved over to support him in sitting up. She traveled from a far-off land. Wait, I already said that? I gave him a nod. I remember, she had traveled the land to help those less fortunate with her magic. But one day on her travels, she was attacked by evil trolls who wanted her magic for themselves. She was in trouble, but then, a passing night came to her rescue with a magical sword to ward off the trolls. Once the cowardly trolls ran away, the knight offered to escort the princess home. "Are we home right now, Kasha?" Yes, we're home. Why you were telling me a story?" I managed to squeak out, which served to jog Dad's memory. "Right. The knight escorted her home, protecting her from all the dangers. But, he protected her from them all until they reached her castle. With his task done, the knight was about to leave until the princess asked him to escort her on her journey the next day. The knight agreed and he escorted her through the woods. After bringing her back home, she asked if he could do it again. The knight agreed, and so he escorted the beautiful princess again. And so, I was at a part. Dad stammered for a moment as he tried to remember what he was saying while I held him a little tighter with one arm while Meepo was held in the other. "Now I've got it," Dad announced, and so, this happened for more days, which extended into weeks, which extended into months, and then into years until one day, the princess made one final request. If he could escort her to a wedding altar. The knight happily agreed and they were soon wed and I could see Dad's eyes were starting to get drowsy as his head slowly began to nod. And then, they had a beautiful and amazing daughter that they loved with all their hearts. And they all had a happily ever after. Dad finished with heavier breathing from the effort. "Did I grant you your wish?" All that and more, Daddy. You're the best dad in the world," I answered, putting a grand smile onto Dad's face, even as his eyelids were drooping further and further. "Well, don't worry. Daddy will make sure your birthday is even better tomorrow," he promised with a weak cough. "Daddy's getting real tired, kiddo. I love you. I'll see you in the morning." My tears were falling at this point. "I love you, too. I'll be waiting for what you've got in store for Emmy tomorrow," I choked out as I watched his eyes fully close for the last time. For a few moments, I was hesitant as I looked at how peaceful Dad looked. Then, the desperate kid that I was wanted to believe that he was okay. "Dad?" I asked, shaking him gently. "Dad?" I asked again to no response. "Daddy?" I sobbed out as I saw his chest stop breathing. That was when the dam finally broke and I began wailing as I pulled into me with both my arms and tail before rocking the one constant in my life that was forever gone. Mom was gone. Dad was gone. I was all alone in the apartment with nothing but my grief, Meepo, and Dad's corpse to keep me company. Then, I eyed the cup that killed Dad. Picking it up, I saw that there was more than half of the water in it left. I was tempted for a long moment with one of the hardest decisions in my life. Then, I roared in anger and grief at myself, the world, and everything in between before throwing the cup at the wall and going back to cradling Dad. I stayed like that for an entire day. Baharuth Empire, Winter. Day 28. Within the walls of the capital city of the Baharuth Empire stood the Imperial Magic Academy, home to the Empire's greatest advancements in magic and producer of the finest mages within the region. This bastion of sorcery and research was part of the backbone of the Empire's military, as many, if not all, mages within its ranks studied from this academy. And leading this academy was both the famous and feared wizard Fluda Paradine. Fully accepted to be the strongest magic caster within both the Baharuth Empire and possibly the Re-Estais Kingdom. There was barely any human alive who could possibly contend individually with his power and wisdom, both of which came from the unnaturally long life that he's lived. As it's currently known, he's older than 200 years old at the very least. And, while his age did show at this point, it was well believed that he could possibly have another century or two of life left within him if he didn't discover some way to even further extend it. But, power, age and wisdom were not all he had in his repertoire. Fluda was extremely close to the royal family, enough so to have been the teacher for 2 generations of the royal family. This gave him immense political power that allowed him to further fund and study his research into the arcane. Currently, behind the walls of the academy and, within a well-guarded room containing a large ritual circle, a gathering of mages had occurred. Most wore white and grey robes covered by hooded cloaks of dark grey. This marked them as disciples of Fluda Paradine. As for the man himself, he stood in front of the inactive ritual circle in layered white robes, with the only bright splashes of color coming from the necklaces of large beads around his neck. Though, most of the necklaces along with the front and back of his robes were covered over by his long beard and slicked back hair that both went down to his waist. Of the parts of the tanned skin of his face that could be seen, all of it was covered in heavy wrinkles while his green eyes held a mixture of weariness and wisdom that was hard to see in most but the oldest people. It was typically hard to find much emotion within his face aside from a constant look of study and thought. Yet, right now, Fluda stood perplexed at the news he had just received from the Re-Estais Kingdom. Before him, a mage in a dirty traveling robe knelt at the man's feet. "You are absolutely serious about this news that you've received?" Fluda questioned but also partially demanded from the man. "Of every word, Master Paradine. Every message that was relayed used the proper coded words to confirm it. And, as a precaution, I had 4 different relay groups confirm it. Our spies vehemently confirm that the Magicians Guild has made contact with a goddess of magic residing within the Lake of Tob known as the Fox Princess. In addition, they have made claim that some type of gift given to the guild by the goddess has been giving their mages enhanced ability in spellcasting and mana." The mage responded. This made Fluda pause in thought. What could possibly allow the half-baked mages of the Re-Estais to enhance their magic? Over the years since the Re-Estais had formed their guild of mages, Fluda had kept close tabs on them, both to hinder them if they started to become too strong, or to steal any valuable magical discoveries that were made. One thing that the old wizard was certain of was that the Magicians' Guild was nowhere near competent enough by themselves to come up with a mass-producible way of enhancing their mages. Have our spies made any discovery as to what this method of enhancement might be and how it enhances one's magic? Fluda questioned. Her blood. They drink an elixir made from her blood. As for the enhancement itself, what's been reported is that it permanently makes it easier for mages to cast their spells and allow for said mages to cast their spells more often. As the messenger said this, Fluda's eyes widened at the concept. A way to permanently enhance a mage like that without the use of a magic item on one's person or a potion with its temporary effect was considered a fanciful concept that belonged to the realm of myths and gods. But this? If it was actually real, then the Baharuth Empire would be able to sweep over the forces of the Re-Estais with an army of enhanced mages, and that was the dull and mindless effect that such an elixir could have. No, what Fluda was truly interested in was the application it could have to his continued magical research. Have our spies had any chance to steal any of this elixir for future study? Fluda asked. I'm sorry to say, Master Fluda, that acquiring any sample of this elixir is impossible due to how well the Magicians' Guild guards it. Any attempt to do so would break whatever cover our spies have. The messenger answered, making Fluda contemplate the options. While Fluda wasn't fully convinced if this was truly a goddess of magic or just some powerful magical being that made the claim to being one, what he was aware of is that she had some method of enhancing mages, either through her blood. If it wasn't a euphemism, or through another substance that she could produce. If acquiring an elixir from the Magicians' Guild was too much of an issue, then they'd just have to go to the source itself, located somewhere within the Lake of Tob. But that also meant that they needed to send their own expeditions into the forest to investigate this after they had scryed the lake to confirm if this goddess truly lived there. After that? Fluda considered what way would one bargain with a supposed goddess? Even more, if she was a goddess of magic, what magic might he be able to learn from her? He had to find out. The rulers are a-wonderin'. Fluda Paradine. It didn't take long after receiving the report from my messenger for me to assemble my disciples around the ritual circle in preparation for casting the spell's 6th tier spell, Greater Scrying. It was a useful spell, but unfortunately, it was heavily limited by the mana a user could put into it. By myself, the spell could reach a radius of about 150 miles, quite possibly a little further. Yet, that would require for me to expend almost all of my mana in the process to do so. Thankfully, with the usage of the ritual circle, my disciples were able to pour their mana into the spell, drastically increasing the distance and lessening the burden upon myself. Alas, with all of my disciples working in tandem with me, the distance the spell could reach was up to the city of Rantel. That made the spell unviable for any spying upon the Re-Estais kingdom due to the prohibitive costs. For one, I would have to constantly relocate myself to the cities on the edge of the Baharuth's borders repeatedly, if not stay there permanently, since I was the only person in the empire that could cast the spell. I had too much of my work and research tied up in our winter to relocate. And that was ignoring that His Majesty called upon me for guidance and aid quite frequently. Then, there was also the requirement of multiple different mages with good mana capacities to aid me in expanding the spell's range. That was too much of a waste of my talents and that of my mages when I could focus my efforts elsewhere. Besides, even if spying upon the Re-Estais from our winter was impossible without the irresponsible misuse of resources, that didn't mean that Greater Scrying couldn't be used within the borders of the Baharuth to spy on any of the potential political enemies of His Majesty. Thankfully, our winter was right in the middle of most of the cities in the Empire, giving a good range of coverage for the spell. With the Great Lake of Tob just within the limits of the spell, it would allow for me to confirm the news of this goddess known as the Fox Princess lived there. From that, I would decide the next course of action. Looking upon all my disciples, I announced, "Prepare yourselves." I cast Greater Scrying. As I said this, I unleashed the buildup of mana and watched with spell come to life in the middle of the ritual circle as a sphere-like portal of energy. Directing the portal's attention upon the great lake of Tob, I waiting in anticipation for the image of the lake to appear. Then, with the sound of cracking glass, the portal shattered into motes of fizzling mana as my eyes widened in astonishment. That had not happened before. I had never encountered anything that could cancel greater scrying upon attempted viewing. That was magic of enormous power to just stop my spell like that. Power beyond that of the 6th tier. Perhaps there really was credence to this goddess? And that excited me. The possibility of learning magic greater than the 6th tier was an opportunity that I would be willing to trade anything for. But first, I needed to scout out the lake with more expendable forces before heading there myself. Master Fluda, one of my disciples, Viskt asked, "What just happened?" I gazed at the man with a look of dire seriousness, an event that fills me with both dread and excitement. My spell was negated by a magic greater than the 6th tier. A hush fell across my disciples as they heard this. "Master, does that mean that the report given by Manius is true?" Another disciple, Alondria Branna, questioned with a growing awe. "Perhaps. But I wish to do some further investigation into this before I can fully believe it. But to begin, I must visit His Majesty before I fully act. And such should take immediate precedence over all else." With my opinion known, I made my way out of the ritual room and off towards His Majesty, Emperor Jerkniv. I felt that it would be best to inform the Emperor of this so that I could attain his aid and resources in this urgent course of events. And, while I did have the funds myself to supply any expedition to the Great Lake of Tob, it wouldn't hurt to try and utilize the royal treasury's coffers before dipping into my own. I had great confidence in being able to convince His Majesty to aid me in light of everything that I have been told. Jerkniv is a smart enough boy to understand the potential issues he might face if he were to assault the Re-Estais and this goddess was on their side. If not, then I would simply fund everything myself and uncover the truth of the matter. Cut. After arriving at the Imperial Palace, it was a simple matter to explain that I had urgent business with the Emperor. None dared to deny the request of His Majesty's mentor and strongest mage in the Empire. From there, I was quickly escorted to the doors of Jerkniv's office. A simple scanning of the richly painted red doors told me that the wards of reinforcement were holding strong. That was something that didn't surprise me, considering that I was the one who had created those wards in the first place. As a child growing up, His Majesty had been the target of multiple assassination attempts. One such attempt, around the age of 6, involved a physically powerful assassin breaking down the door to his room after fighting his way past most of the guards. If I hadn't been with him at the time teaching one of his lessons, then the boy would have certainly died. From that point on, I took upon the task of warding the boy's doors to hold against assault until help could arrive. In a way, it could be reasoned to say that I am possibly a little overprotective of the boy. I did essentially raise him like my own son, so it would hard not to. It's only a shame that the boy did not have an aptitude for magic. Giving a nod to the pair of guards at the door, I waited as they opened the door, allowing me to step inside the grand room that Emperor Jerkniv used as his office. Various expensive heirlooms lined the walls of the office, while the marble floor was covered in a crimson carpet. At 4 different points of the room were figures covered in black armor. Each of them were part of the 4 Imperial Knights squad. Neither their station of birth, nor their background mattered in induction into this squad. As long as their skill and prowess were above all others, they could join this team whose sole goal was to carry out the Emperor's will and defend him with their lives. Focusing to the center of the room, I saw Jerkniv set down his quill and look up at me with a smile. "It isn't often that you come to my palace with a request, Gramps. Most of the time, I end up coming to you," Jerkniv teased, making me smirk in amusement. "I'm old, Your Majesty. There's not much I need help with at this point in my life. In comparison, you're young and still wise enough to receive counsel from others before you commit to a great decision." I replied back. "Then what does that say about you, Gramps? You never ask for the counsel of others." It says that I'm either wise enough to no longer need counsel or too stubborn to try and hear it. I answered as I approached his desk covered in gold filigree. Fair enough. Jerkniv reasoned before turning serious. So, why did you come to me today? Earlier today, I received reports from my spies in the Reastais that the Magicians' Guild of Rantel found what is said to be a goddess residing at the Great Lake of Tob. In addition to this, the report says that they received a gift from this goddess that is able to greatly enhance the magical abilities of their mages. As I said this, a look of deep thought overcame Jerkniv's face. You were able to guarantee the validity of such reports? Jerkniv asked in concern. A frown slightly marred my face. I'm not absolutely certain that this fox princess, as they call her, is a goddess. What I can confirm is that she was powerful enough to stop a 6th-tier spell of mine from scrying the lake. That immediately tells me that she is stronger than I am. I admitted, shocking Jerkniv. If that's the case, then do we have any idea about where the allegiance of this fox princess lies? Would she side with the Reastais if we assaulted them in a few months? As Jerkniv asked this, he was already going through the potential repercussions of such an event. Our spies do not know. All that they have told us is that the Magicians' Guild is worshipping her and that she gifted them what is said to be her blood to enhance them. But that is all we have to go on. For all we know, she could be uncaring to all but her followers. I truthfully answered. But if she were to side with the Reastais, could I truly say I would try aiding the boy as best as I could, or would I attempt to join her in an effort to learn from her magic? And already, I knew what my answer would be. But that doesn't confirm if she would stand in my army's way or not. Considering that you came to me yourself with this information, what is it that you think about this? Magic is your specialty, after all. I wish to hire an initial scouting party of adventurers and mercenaries to investigate the lake before going there myself, regardless of if the scouts come back with news. I can't ignore something of this magnitude, Your Majesty. I answered. Jerkniv nodded in agreement. If you were to head to the lake and try to meet this goddess, would you be willing to take one of my knights there with you to act as protection in case such meeting turns hostile? I could read the dual intention behind requesting for one of his imperial knights to accompany me. One reason was to protect me, not that I truly needed it. Another was to try and establish a diplomatic relationship with one of his representatives. But the final, and true, reason was to potentially try to assassinate this goddess if she turned out to be hostile. If it failed, then the boy would have a better read on the fox princess's strength with the loss of his guard. How could I deny you, Your Majesty? Who would you send with me? Lena's. As Jerkniv said this, a woman in dark armor with long blonde hair approached. By all rights she could be considered a beauty from what one could view from the left side of her face, with the only blemish being a tiny mole at the corner of her mouth. Yet, the long bangs covering the right side of her face hid a horrid curse afflicting her that caused the right side of her face to disgustingly secrete pus, with no method yet found to fix it. Not even I have been able to break this curse afflicting her. She was also the least trustworthy of all of Jerkniv's knights because of her lack of loyalty. The only reason she was even working for the Emperor is due to him having a higher chance of discovering a cure with all of his resources in comparison to others. But the moment that someone else came along with a better chance of fixing her, she'd leave Jerkniv in a heartbeat. This also made her the most expendable of his knights. I could see the gears running through the boy's mind. Send the expendable knight to potentially die if the worst came to pass, while also measuring the strength of the fox princess against a close-quarters combatant, whereas he could measure her magical ability through myself. There was a bit of pride I had for the boy utilizing his resources to properly gauge a potential enemy. He had done well with my teachings. I'll put a request out through proxies for adventurers and mercenaries. Once completed, we shall find out exactly what we are dealing with. I summarized. With any luck, this will be a boon for the Empire. Otherwise, I'll need to change our plans. Jerkniv pondered aloud, something that I fully agreed with, even if my thoughts went opposite his. Yes. Let's hope. Momonga/Eins Ul Gaun. Sitting upon my throne, I found myself listening to a tedious amount of reports from both Albedo and Demiurge. For the past few days, I'd been auditing every part of Nazarick to get a handle on events that were occurring with my subordinates. Ever since the confrontation with Kasha 5 days ago, I found myself unable to try and meet with her until I had Nazarick's internal issues under my control. It's because of this that I've been going through the activities of the inhabitants on each floor of Nazarick to make sure that they weren't doing anything that would get them killed by an extremely pissed-off kitsune. On top of that, I've also had to delve into scaling up food production after hearing of multiple instances of cannibalism on the second floor. Beyond that, there were also other things that I've had to immediately shut down. Aura, for instance, wanted to let multiple beasts out of the tomb to explore and hunt. One problem with that, we're too close to multiple human settlements that releasing what Aura considered to be simple beasts outside of Nazarick would cause too large of a risk of being noticed by some random traveler who would alert the local authorities. As a method to placate her, I allowed her to instead bring back beasts to Nazarick that she thought were interesting. Last I saw of her, she was playing with some strange singing moles while Mare just watched in interest. Shaltir wanted to acquire some random travelers who wouldn't be missed to utilize as living blood bags. I had her cease all thoughts of that immediately. As of the current moment, my only idea of appeasing her was to find a substitute for human blood, or I might give her free rein to capture criminals that society wouldn't care about. In a way, it would actually be a service to permanently prevent them from harming others while not letting them go to waste like a simple execution would cause. The two simplest floor guardians to handle were Cocytus and Victim. Cocytus, when he wasn't following orders to monitor Nazarick, only wished to fight decent opponents. My current idea was to possibly assemble small mock fights in Nazarick's Colosseum which could satisfy Cocytus' urge to fight. As for Victim, he was content to relax unless called upon, making him the easiest. That really only left Albedo and Demiurge for me to go over with. I did need to learn of Demiurge's progress after all on the more ethical farming practices I was having him enact. "Let's start with you, Demiurge," I said, causing the Archdevil to stand at attention. "How is progress with the new farm? Additionally, are there any other plans beside the farm that you've been working on?" For the farm, the harvesting process has been going splendidly. The only setback is that the hide harvested for the scroll materials is that it, like the humans before, is only suitable for scrolls up to 2nd tier at best. Then, he pushed his glasses up his nose, making me slightly worried at what he was about to tell me. As for other plans, Albedo and I have been working together on 2 of them, while I have already drawn up plans for a 3rd. One is a retooled plan to capture Nina Veyron after our prior plan was not to your liking. I couldn't stop myself from resting my skeletal face in my palm as I considered how Demiurge misinterpreted my orders. "Demiurge, can you please explain to me what you thought I meant when I said to cease all plans against Kasha's daughter?" I asked with slight frustration. "As I understood it, you believed that the agents we originally planned to send after the girl were too weak and would fail the mission, drawing Kasha's ire upon Nazarick without any suitable hostage to control her. As such, we planned to use agents, such as the Pleiades, to perform a capture mission." I felt myself sigh at exactly what I quickly realized was going to be so much work. "Demiurge, and Albedo as well," I saw the succubus perk up upon her name being said, "end any and all plans now, and in the future, against Kasha's daughter. I specifically ordered, now, repeat back to me how you are interpreting this order." "Of course, my lord," Demiurge said with a bow, "you wish to permanently put pause to any actions taken against the girl until you feel that it is in Nazarick's best interest to have a hostage against Kasha." At this point, that was likely the closest he would get to actually interpreting what I wanted without devolving into a further master plan or doublespeak. I was almost tempted to think about why I should even bother trying to rein my subordinates in when I didn't care about most of the people outside of Nazarick. It would be so much easier and take considerably less effort to let my subordinates just live with their fantasy of me being an evil overlord trying to conquer the world. The only thing holding me back from allowing my subordinates to act out their wishes was Kasha. One single person who was probably the only friend I might have in this world. And yet, what was one person's wishes in comparison to all of Nazarik's? Thoughts for later, I suppose. Instead, I focused back upon my subordinates. Good. Unless I give the order, towards either of Kasha's daughters, treat them as under Nazarik's protection until then. I ordered with very little room for misinterpretation. No harm or actions will befall either of the sisters from Nazarik unless you order it, Lord Ines. Demiurge replied with utmost sincerity. That filled me with a small measure of relief as I gazed upon Albedo, who looked at me with a simple smile. And what of you, Albedo? I asked. Your wish is my command, Lord Ines. Nazarik will not take any action against the sisters. Albedo answered, earning a nod from me. Now, what is this second plan that you and Albedo have been working on? I asked the Archdevil. Earlier, you showed disappointment in the progress your Momen persona has been making with reputation within the kingdom. We felt that if your Momen persona had a fabricated demon lord to fight and defeat, then your reputation would skyrocket and put you into a better spot for whatever form of political maneuvering or outcome you've wanted. That actually intrigued me. Adamantite plate aside, it was considerably difficult to continue garnering a reputation quickly when, besides Shiltir, the worst I've been dealing with is simple monsters. Even the feast I attended days ago did little but get the name of Momen into the mouths of the minor nobles who had attended or gave me options for future work. Fighting a demon lord would also land me political favors depending on who I protected from the conjured enemy. That would be useful for future endeavors that I, as Ines Ulgaun, couldn't accomplish subtly. Go on and tell me of what this plan entails. I'm interested, I said, giving room for Demiurge to continue. This made Demiurge smile. The plan would have Albedo play the part of a demon lord assaulting the Re-Estai's capital. Midway through the assault, the adventurers, Momen and Nobbe, would arrive to stop the threat and drive off the demon lord and her forces. Within all the confusion, some of our covert members will sneak around the city to acquire information and items of import to Nazarik. When Demiurge said this, I considered the possibilities of a demon lord attacking the capital of the kingdom. This wasn't a game, as the people who might die in such an attack were real, and yet, if they were to die from a false flag attack, their deaths would have meaning. It would aid both myself and Nazarik, which could mean that I might be able to help more people in the future as Momen. But did that need to happen, or was I just getting impatient at how slow my progress was as Momen? All of this didn't even consider that Kasha would never allow it if she found out about the plan. I could always just lie to her. Keep her out of the loop until everything was over and claim that the demon lord wasn't mine. While skeptical, she wouldn't have any reason to actually doubt me since I haven't lied to her before. I needed to give some thought about this before I could really sign off on the idea. This wasn't soldiers butchering a village or bandits I might potentially allow Shiltir to hunt. These were innocent people. This was a slippery slope that I was approaching. Demiurge, I'll allow you to assemble forces and come up with a plan for this attack as long as it entails as little destruction and casualties as possible. Additionally, none of this is to go ahead until I give the direct order for it. I explained. As you wish. I'll have a plan and forces gathered within 2 weeks for your approval. I gave him a nod of acknowledgement. That gave me time to really consider this plan. Finally, what about this last plan that you have in motion? Due to your wish to avoid conquest against the Re-Estai's kingdom or the Baharuth Empire, I have looked at simple conquest against the nation of the Wyvern-riding tribe before moving on to the Dragon Kingdom. As they are small in scale compared to their neighboring countries, it would be simple enough to conquer them before using their country as a staging point for the Dragon Kingdom. Demiurge finished explaining his scheme with a mixture of pride and pleasure on his face. As I considered it, I thought about how not only Demiurge, but also every other NPC in Nazarik believed that I wanted to rule the world, enough so that they were devoting everything to planning and gearing up for it. What would me being made the ruler of the world bring? You agreed that our original world was a hellhole, that this world seemed so much better and could be made better. Kasha thought that altruism and aiding the people of this new world would go a long ways in making things better than Earth. And yet, from learning a small summary of the things that nations were dealing with, it seemed like more work than simple aid would be needed. Kasha said the Re-Estais is filled with corrupt nobles and an incompetent ruler. The Baharuth planned to continue a grinding war until the Re-Estais ran out of men and resources. And 3 of the human-centric nations, the Holy Kingdom, the Slain Theocracy, and the Dragon Kingdom, were constantly fending off stronger and stronger attacks from non-human nations that planned to kill or enslave them. While not the directly toxic hellhole that Earth was, this new world was a hellhole in its own way. The only difference was that it looked nicer and the oncoming misery was out of sight. Maybe there was a way to fulfill Kasha's wishes of making the world a better place while also satisfying what my NPCs felt I should be doing? I could do it as an experiment of sorts. Conquer a small nation or 2, see what I could do to positively change it for the betterment of the nation's inhabitants and for Nazarick, and look into potentially expanding if the experiment worked out. Kasha might initially disagree with the method, but if I made the end result better than when I arrived, she'd have little reason to argue. I think that would be for the best. I will allow this plan to happen if you abide by a few conditions. Of which, conquering the wyvern-riding tribe should be done with as little brutality, torture, and death as possible. I want to rule its people as my subjects, not as slaves or resources to be harvested from. I see this singular conquest as an experiment in making a nation better and its people happier than before I arrived. Now, tell me how you interpret this order? Demiurge pushed his glasses up and grinned. My lord, you wish for me to challenge myself by making this war have as little, if no, bloodshed or violent methods occur as possible. You want me to discover a method to make the population want you as their ruler, in comparison to their own, so that they may become your loyal subjects. While the doublespeak was still littered through his answer, Demiurge was close to the intent of my request, at least. Keep me informed of all updates pertaining to this. The Archdevil gave a bow. It will be done. With Demiurge handled, I looked to Albedo. Aside from your 2 plans made with Demiurge, do you have any other plans being worked on? I asked the succubus. She maintained that soft smile and shook her head. No, my lord. Aside from my normal duties to Nazarick, along with the plans I collaborated with Demiurge, I have nothing to report. Thank whatever god is out there that Albedo wasn't coming up with schemes left, right, and center. At least with Albedo, it seemed that I didn't have to constantly focus my attention on her like I did with Demiurge. If that is all, you 2 may leave, I said, dismissing the 2. They both gave a bow before leaving to perform their duties. Kasha. I had to scrap training for my team today, like I had for the past few days, because I needed to focus my attention on the Elwold situation. It had been a fiasco that needed to be dealt with delicately. As such, I felt it best to send them all back to Rantel to wind down and take a break from their training. Additionally, I didn't trust putting them in a dungeon that Momonga had worked on with me and filled with his monsters at the moment. I kept quiet on all the demonic details of what happened from the others, aside from Lucrute. As far as they were all aware, a village had been attacked by monsters and I was aiding them in my goddess persona. And to start with, I first made sure that Momonga's people were out of Fieldwold with my kitsune covertly moving about the city and sniffing around for duplicates of people or monsters. That took a few days as I wanted to be thorough about it. I didn't need any more surprises to show up right now. Thankfully, I was given the all clear from my servants that they didn't discover any signs of monsters hiding within the city. This led to the next step of my operation in relocating all the former victims back to their homes. As for the former victims, I created some temporary housing for the transition, then followed that up with providing everyone food and water since this village was not prepared for handling such an influx of mouths to feed even before their subjugation and torture, let alone after it. That made it convenient to use permanize magic, enlarge, to grow small amounts of food into large feasts for everyone. I've also taken to wearing my goddess outfit around the people in the village, though, this time, I finally made some alterations so that I didn't look like I was about to start spinning on a pole. More specifically, longer skirts and less of my tits on display. I did keep the original version of it stored in my inventory for personal use. I made sure to check on Nero during this interim, and the kid seemed to be holding up well considering the things he went through. He spent all of his time, when not with his grandfather and sister or training with Yamato, helping out everyone in any way he could. The kid was busy now, but I wondered what he'd be doing after everything had calmed down. Maybe I should try aiding him with his training. While Yamato would be great in training him for physical combat as well as paladin skills, it could be a good idea for me to help him with his magic training since Mom was a goddess of magic after all. I could even have Nina tutor him if the chance arose, since it would both help him in learning magic, reinforce what Nina had been learning from me, and give the pair of them more people around their age to talk to. Here, look at me finding kids my daughter's age for her to talk to. Next, I'll be scheduling playdates for her. All of this led to me standing before a crowd of these displaced survivors that had been gathered together in the village center for their relocation back to their homes. Even the original residents of Elwold had come out to listen to what I had to say. During this, I could hear all of their hushed whispering as they looked at me. What do you think the goddess brought us here for? Is she planning to perform another miracle? Maybe she's sending us home. Many more such questions spread out through the crowd until I finally spoke, causing a hush to fall over the crowd. I know that it has been a difficult period for all of you. You have all endured and survived challenges that you should have never been forced to face. But I wanted to let you all know that, after making certain that your homes and city were safe, you will all be able to return to your homes, your families, and your friends today. The moment I announced this, cheers and prayers of gratitude came from the crowd, all directed at me. Even with the pleasurable warmth filling me from this worship, both direct and indirect, what felt better than all of that was to see all the happiness and hope shining in their eyes. In a few moments, I will open a gate to Fieldwold. From there, I'll give each of you a parting gift for all your troubles and have you go through to your homes. Saying this, I cast gate to the city square of Fieldwold and patiently waited as all the survivors formed a line and approached me. The first to come up to me was a father with a haggard face but an expression of relief that juxtaposed it. He had brown hair sprinkled with white hairs. Holding his left hand was his daughter, a girl of 7 or 8, who shared a lot of resemblance with her father. Yet, while his expression was filled with gratitude and relief as he looked upon me, his daughter's gaze was filled with awe and childlike wonder. As they approached, the girl broke away from her father and ran up to hug me around the legs before her father could pull the girl back. "Thank you for saving Daddy and me, Miss Goddess." I smiled and crouched down to her eye level. "You're very welcome. I was happy to help," I answered while rubbing the top of her head. "Are the monsters going to be gone forever now?" "Yes, the monsters are gone and will never hurt you. But," saying this, I conjured a little golden fox statuette in my hand and held it out for her. "If you're ever in trouble or scared, just hold that close to yourself and think of me and all the bad things will go away." I watched the girl take the statuette from my hand and hold it tight against her chest like it was a stuffed animal. "I will, Miss Goddess." I gave her one last pat on the head before standing up to speak with her father. "I apologize about my daughter, my lady. I hope her actions didn't bother you?" he said with worry in his voice. Putting my hand on his shoulder, I said, "You have nothing to apologize for. She's just acting like a child her age should," that reassured the man as he smiled and nodded. "Thank you." A moment later and I conjured a fox statue made of gold and gave it to him. He looked astounded as he took it into his hands before being surprised by the weight. "Is this solid gold?" "Indeed it is." I answered with a nod. "Do whatever you wish with it. Keep it, sell it, melt it down, it's yours to do with as you please." "How can I ever repay you or something like this?" he asked. "Live well and take care of your daughter. That's the only payment I want or need. I promise that I will. Aveline and I will never forget what you have done for us," the father replied. I nodded before bidding him to walk through the gate. Aveline gave me a wave back to me while I gave her a little wave in reply. Then, the next person in line stepped forwards. That's how it went for what felt like an hour as I spoke with the person for a few moments, gave them a gold or platinum statue before sending them on their way. I flipped between gold and platinum due to how many people I was giving these gifts to. It was a risk of wrecking the economy by flooding so much gold into the market. But, when I had finally finished with the last person, I closed the gate and looked upon all the villagers who had been watching me do this. I shall leave for now, but my servants will remain to continue watching over and protecting you, I announced before teleporting away. Nina. It had been an odd few days to say the least. The morning after Mom came back from wherever it was that she had spent a day at, she announced that dungeon delving would be put on hold for the foreseeable future and that we'd be heading back to Rantel. Adding to that, Mom had been extremely busy with helping a village which had been attacked by monsters. From what she said, a follower of hers had been in the village at the time and had prayed for her help. And, which she did save the village, a lot of destruction occurred which she had to clean up along with ensuring that the village could stand on its own before she was comfortable with backing away. Because of this, Mom didn't have as much time to directly tutor me, so I continued working on Foxfire Will-O-Wisp, while enjoying my time where I could hang out with Tyr. Currently, I was in the garden of the sanctuary mastering having 3 spheres of Foxfire orbit around me as I studied the animation method that Mom had written for the orbs. From what I could understand, animation came with intent. One had to focus their intent into the mana used in the spell, almost like pre-written instructions. These instructions could vary between being simple, such as attack enemy nearby and block attacks, to more complex, such as attack a specific enemy if they perform a certain spell and block attacks from another specific if they are not magical. It was better to use simple command intents since the more complex the intent, the longer it would take to cast. Well, at least if you weren't Mom. It took her under 3 seconds to cast the spell utilizing highly complex commands, whereas it took me 10 to 15 to create a single sphere with barely any intent put into it. And that was just a single sphere, not the 3 that the spell used to make it complete. Mom just said I needed more practice before I'd make a working sphere of Foxfire Will-O-Wisp. But I was so close. I just needed to work at it a little bit further and I could nail down the animation method. Then, it'd only be an issue of concentrating on all 3 spheres at once after putting intent into them. I could likely get the animation method down within this week or next week, but then there was getting all 3 spheres to orbit me after that would probably take a week or so more. And then, mastering the time it took to cast the spell to be viable in combat would take even longer. Though, I guess I really shouldn't be complaining about the time it took me to learn this second-tier spell in comparison to other. I'd probably get it down within a few weeks due to my talent and Mom's notes being very good at explaining how to cast the spell. In comparison, others would likely be taking months or even years to learn this spell, though that might be shortened with Mom's notes in hand. What made all of this work worth it, besides learning a powerful spell, was how giddy I felt for the day when I finally got to show Mom the results of what I learned. Why, Mom and Grandma, that day was going to be amazing. Hopefully, following that, future spells in the tome would be quicker to learn after building off of my knowledge from prior spells. I can't wait to see what the strongest spell Mom put in this tome is like. Speaking of Mom, she's been getting a bit of attraction with the people of Rantel. For the past few days, the Magician's Guild's religion, the Order of the Fox Princess, has been giving out healing potions to the people of the city as charity. From what I and the others saw when we visited the Adventurers Guild, they definitely took well to the charity along with talk about the Fox Princesses, enough so that I spotted a few adventurers visiting the Magician's Guild out of interest. It also helped that the group of adventurers she saved on the night the Magician's Guild was attacked had been spreading praise about her, especially their team leader, Elia. Then again, I think anyone would be highly grateful for being resurrected from the dead like they had all been. I hadn't heard a peep coming from the temple in the city. Apparently, it seems that the priests are still reeling over what happened to Verona. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the church has given up. They'll probably do something in retaliation, I just don't know what it will be until it finally happens. Electo Damien Ryle Vaself 2. It has been some time since Eight Fingers last had a meeting together. But that should be a given considering both the nature of our organization and mentality of its members. None of us could trust one another as they all vied for my position while I did what was needed to keep them at theirs. It was funny, in a way. If multiple of them worked together, they could easily have me deposed from my position as head of the organization. At the same time, they were all so self-interested in their own positions of power that they pulled each other down. It was just like the phenomenon of crabs in a bucket. Leave the top of the bucket open, and instead of working together to escape, they would pull whoever was the closest to escaping back down with them. Back down into the muck where they all belonged. Lubelina, before she died in that fire of her brothel, she was nothing more than a commoner who lucked into her fortune. Now, she had been replaced by Priyan Poulsen, another commoner who had been lucky enough to have enough knowledge, and be high enough in his former position, to replace the late Lubelina. Hilma Signaeus, a whore who knew enough secrets from fucking nobles to gain her power. All of what she had was due to her appearance. Take that away and she was nothing more than a scheming bitch that was a decent fuck. Ampatif Coco Doll, a degenerate with a knack for torture and breaking slaves that would imprison and fuck any he took a fancy to. Only his first name was real. Coco Doll was just his attempt to have three names so that he could imitate nobility when he was really just an urchin from the gutters. 0, a one-named killer whose only aspirations lay in proving himself the strongest fighter in the kingdom. The tactical mind he had was wasted on his pursuits. Raglin Zolba, the smuggler who was good enough at his job to not get caught. His mind was only built to smuggle cargo, otherwise he was a simple wretch with a gambling addiction. Noah Sweden, he was a conman who managed to trick enough idiots out of their money to make a fortune. Yet, even with all the gambling dens he ran, and all the fortunes he threw around himself to display his opulence, he was merely playing at being a noble. Finally, there was Count Azilk Bernard von Dalton III, the only other true noble at our table aside from myself. He was the only person of our group that I could respect due to his family's history. And because of that, he was also the person I viewed as being the most dangerous to me. At the very least, he wouldn't be that worrisome once he left the country with a princess of his in tow. Considering that her kingdom was so far away that I hadn't heard of it, that meant he'd have little power to affect my ruling position in the Riastais. Though, considering his high likelihood of becoming king of another nation, that was certainly a good trade-off to the head of the Eight Fingers. It was certainly on a faster route to kingship than my own path. And what a long path it was indeed. As my father was the brother of the former king, it made the fool Ramposa my direct cousin. Ever since my father was cheated out of the throne by Ramposas, he had been plotting to get, if not himself, then me to the throne. I shared this desire, especially because of how incompetent Ramposa III was. He let his noble vassals plot around himself, being none the wiser on how truly alone he was in court. His realm floundered, with his favorite daughter, Rena, being one of the few that was trying to do something about it, even if that was in vain. At the same time, his sons bickered over the throne like children, bringing the realm to the cusp of civil war in the process. Ramposa should have named his successor as Zainak ages ago, considering how much less likely the man would run the kingdom into the ground like his brother, Barbaro. They were all an embarrassment to the line of Ryle v. Self. As head of Eight Fingers, I've been slowly working on destabilizing Ramposa's position so that his leadership can be put into question. From there, it is only a matter of allying with the right people and seeing both Barbaro and Zainak face tragic accidents. As for Rena, without her father's protection, she can easily be removed. Ramposa's two other daughters are no threat to me considering that neither has sired a son, not for lack of trying mind you. Quite tragic that they've had multiple miscarriages. Sadder still that the three sons that they've had between them were so sickly that they didn't survive the week. As consolation, at least they've had 4 daughters between them. This left me as third in line for the throne as anyone else in my way has suffered accidents throughout the years. But now, My time for ascension is growing near. I've already put into place multiple assassination plots on either of Ramposa's sons. From there I'd be made king, and for my first act as king, I'd eradicate 8 fingers and establish my competence to the masses. Next, I'd change how we've been fighting this war on the Katsa Plains. The Baharuth Empire has been utilizing mages in their armies for years, while the Reistais has absurdly focused our efforts on cavalry. It's astounding how our armies have held out for so long when we deny ourselves a weapon of amazing power to use in our wars. The Magicians' Guild was established by our country to utilize the ability of our mages, but we've only ignored them, making them a dangerous faction that has hidden many tools and abilities that should be used by the crown, not hoarded by a bunch of scholars. Aside from updating our armies, I had plans in place for assassinating Emperor Jerknev, something that Ramposa has been too honorable to attempt. With luck, my plots would succeed. If not, I would have to resort to more drastic measures. By the end of it all, I would be the king that solved all the problems that Ramposa had been too incompetent to fix, even if half of his issues were from my own doing. Until then, I had to play the part of the head of 8 fingers. As I sat at the round table of our meeting room, I took note of everyone who was in the room. First of interest was Zero, the giant of a man with tanned skin covered in tattoos. He seemed to revel in showing off his muscles as his vest covered very little of his torso, and nothing of his arms. Like a brute, he sat with his feet propped up on the table, while his hairless head was propped against his arm. I watched his eyes study each of us with feigned indifference. Next was Raglin. His body was covered in a green threadbare cloak, which his face had a thick and bushy brown beard. From what I've learned, he tended to like radically changing up his appearance every few weeks to avoid being recognized due to being a smuggler. Last time I saw him, he had extremely long and messy hair like a barbarian. Next was Purian, visibly looking nervous at his first attended meeting. He had high cheekbones, giving him a slightly skeletal appearance. Additionally, his blonde hair had a ridiculous bowl cut that had a ponytail in the back. His outfit looked recently bought as it seemed ill-fitting on his body. Likely, the man bought a new outfit after attaining his inherited position. It amused me with how he tried so hard to make himself seem powerful, when all it did was highlight how out of his depth he truly was. In comparison to Purian was Noah, dressed lavishly in fine silk clothing as gold and jewels draped from his neck and covered his fingers. He had his blonde hair gelled back while his moustache was neatly trimmed. The greed coming from his purple eyes was palpable, but it also made him highly predictable. As long as he had wealth and power, he could be easily controlled. Noah was someone I could easily trust, since I could always trust that he would go for whatever offer that would give him more money and power. As such, he wouldn't join whatever plans of betrayal that the others might conjure against me, simply because I could always give him more than anyone else. But were I to be unable to satisfy his greed, he'd immediately abandon me for the next best offer. Finally, there was Count Zelk, who looked so visibly different from when I had last seen him. His hair was disheveled while the beginnings of a stubbled beard filled his face. The clothing he wore seemed slept in, but his eyes, they were the most drastic of his change in appearance. They looked haunted, with the heavy bags under them denoting how little sleep that he's been getting. And yet, regardless of his exhaustion, his body constantly fidgeted in his seat, almost like he wanted to do something else right now. What could have happened to the Count to cause this? Putting the question aside, another question I had was where Ampetif and Hilma were. It had been almost 20 minutes since the meeting should have started and they still hadn't arrived. How long do we have to continue waiting for Coco and Hilma? Zero demanded impatiently. I have other things to do besides wait for those two to finally show up. Raglin was the next to speak up. I'm in agreement with Zero. If they haven't arrived by now, then we shouldn't be forced to wait any further for them to show up. My, you two are in such a rush, Noah teased in his lazy tone. Perhaps our associates had a slight delay in their journey? Zero glared at Noah upon hearing this. Easy enough for you to say. You just have to sit on your fat ass to make money for this organization. I have to actually do work to keep things running smoothly. The warrior growled. I think that just says more about your choice in career path compared to mine. Noah retorted. Zero gave Noah a vicious grin. Would your career path prevent me from putting my fist through your skull within the next 5 seconds? Noah's eyes lost the lazy gaze they held and now glowered at Zero in anger. Before anything further could come of this, I held up my hand to both of them. Please, let's avoid any needless conflict among ourselves. Zero does have a point that we do need to begin our meeting, with or without our 2 missing associates. If they arrive during their meeting, they can be informed of what they missed. That was when the doors of the meeting room swung open, letting the bright light of the hallway outside shine into our dimmer meeting room. I saw 2 figures standing there, and almost assumed it was Ampetif and Hilma that had finally arrived until my eyes caught up with me. Standing there was a pair of women that I couldn't recognize. One was a beautiful and shapely blonde woman in strange black clothing. Her eyes were a glowing gold as they scanned the room with an unreadable expression that the smile she had didn't match. The only thing I could recognize on her was the adamantite plate of the Adventurers Guild resting on top of her chest. What was an adamantite plate doing here? Next to her was a woman with messy red hair that went down to her shoulders. Her clothing consisted of a simple white dress that seemed more like a sheet of cloth tied around herself to give her some form of modesty. That was all she wore, as her feet lacked any form of footwear. This red-haired woman seemed to hug onto the blonde's arm like a lifeline. It was when my gaze went to her face that my blood went cold. Even with her sunken face lacking the calculating vindictiveness that I remember, I knew this woman. Yet, she had been thought to be dead. Lubelina. Yet, the woman I saw now could be said to be what was left of one of the cruel leaders of 8 Fingers. There was no malice, no cruelty, nothing of the former rival that had once been on our council. Now, just a broken woman whose attention was fixated on the blonde next to her with a mixture of terror and submission in her gaze. Hello, everyone. Sorry to barge in, but my friend, Lube, here. The blonde slightly pushed Lubelina, still cowering into the blonde's arm, to the forefront like a parent introducing their shy child, was so excited to introduce me to all of her friends. Purian was the first to speak up in recognition. Lubelina, is that you? He asked in disbelief. The redhead seemed to look to the blonde for permission, and the blonde gave a nod and a grin. Lubelina turned back to Purian and answered, Why yes. I am Lube. She answered in a demure tone. After Lubelina said this, one of her hands let go of the blonde's arm and clutched the side of her head as her face became filled with pain. Then it faded and the redhead went back to wrapping that arm around the blonde's once more. Now, Lube, how about you introduce me to all of your friends? The blonde asked Lubelina, as if talking to a child. This is my mistress goddess, Kasha Blanc. I do whatever she wants and she makes the voices go away. She then looked back to Kasha and asked, did I do good? Kasha gave her a pat on the head. Very good. Let's go find our seats at the table, Lube. Upon saying this, they headed for the 2 empty seats of Ampetif and Hilma. While everyone was reeling from what they just saw, I took recognition of the name that Lubelina had said. Kasha Blanc. The same name of the princess from a foreign land that Count Azelk should have had in his dungeon being broken right now. My eyes glanced over to the man and saw how frightened he looked as he did everything to avoid gazing at the blonde, like he was trying to avoid her attention. That told me everything I needed to know. Whatever kind of torture or magic that Lubelina went through to become as she is now, Count Azelk possibly suffered as well. And that meant he's been a spy for Kasha this entire time. While I can enjoy the stick you managed to remove from Lubelina's ass, those seats aren't yours, Zero said as he finally took his feet off the table and seemed ready to stand. Trust me, the 2 former owners of those seats won't need them anymore. Kasha answered as she sat Lubelina into Hilma's chair. And you killed them? Noah asked as he looked at the blonde with some concern. At the moment? I think one of the 2 is still alive right now. Just as the words left her lips, Zero's chair flew into the wall behind him, smashing into pieces, as the warrior shot across the table with his fist cocked back to immediately kill the woman. But, much to all of our surprise, Zero seemed to stop in the air, about 3 feet away from Kasha with his fist outstretched. "What is this?" Zero growled out as his muscles strained against some invisible force keeping him in place. Then, much to our horror and disgust, the arm outstretched towards Kasha snapped in place at the elbow, with Zero's forearm now bent backwards. Zero shouted in agony as his body thrashed, yet was still unable to move. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just have this habit where I do whatever I want with body parts when people freely offer them to me," Kasha said in mock apology. "The only thing I was offering to you was a quick death, you blonde bitch," Zero spat at the woman in a mixture of rage and agony. The most unsettling thing was how Kasha continued to maintain a smile on her face as Zero's left arm snapped at the elbow, eliciting another roar from the man. "You bitch. Didn't your mother ever teach you that it's impolite to say that to a woman?" Kasha said with a chastising tone, followed by Zero's right leg breaking at the knee. As Zero screamed once more, I spotted Purian quietly sneaking away from the table and towards the door while the woman's attention was focused on Zero. He seemed like he was about to make his way out as well when he opened the door. But glancing back to Kasha, and how she didn't even seem to react to the light of the hallway entering the room told me that she already knew, and that Purian wasn't going to escape. I was proven correct as when Purian entered the hallway to run away, a flash of red fur dashed past Purian, taking his hand in the process and knocking him to the ground. From the angle of the doorway, I couldn't tell what had attacked the coward. But from the way that he looked around himself in terror, there were more creatures in the hallway besides just the one that took his hand. Purian then tried to quickly do a mixture of stumbling and crawling towards the meeting room, slipping on the blood pooling at his feet for part of it. "No. Let me in. Let me in," he shouted like his life depended on it. Just as he was about to cross the threshold of the doorway, what looked like a snake covered in blue fur wrapped around his ankle and began pulling him away. "No. Don't do this. Let me go," he shouted while scrabbling against the floor to find some form of purchase with both his free hand and the stump of his right hand, smearing blood on the floor. "I'll go back in. Just let me go." Something slowly closed the door to our meeting room from the hallway, and my last vision of Purian was him crying and begging as he was dragged out of sight down the hallway while the door closed completely. No, Purian's muffled screaming came from the hallway before being quickly cut off. My heart thumped in fear as I couldn't tell what was worse, the terror of knowing that we couldn't escape or the terror of not knowing what the hell was out there that would tear us apart for trying. My gaze trailed back to Kasha, along with everyone else in the room as she snapped Zero's other knee, earning one more scream before the broken warrior heavily breathed in pain and exhaustion. "Let's see, what do I know about you, Zero?" Kasha asked rhetorically. "You are the muscle of 8 fingers who kills anyone you're told to kill. You're also obsessed with being known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom by fighting the 2 people who are considered better than you, Brain Unglaeus and Kazivstranov. Well, not to worry as you've just fought the strongest in the kingdom and were thoroughly defeated." Zero glared at Kasha upon hearing this. "You're not the strongest warrior. Just a witch hiding behind her spells," he retorted. Kasha seemed to take on an apologetic look. "Oh, of course. How rude of me to hide myself from you." A moment later, multiple limbs of golden fur materialized from the blonde as a pair of matching ears appeared on her head. I counted 9 of these limbs, which I realized were her tails, with 4 of them wrapped around each of Zero's limb and 1 wrapped around his torso. These tails were all keeping him in place, and they were also what had been snapping each one of his limbs like they were twigs. Is this better? Aside from hiding my true appearance, my tails were all that I used to beat you. Therefore, that still makes me stronger than you. She taunted as Zero looked on in horror. The moment you made me your opponent, you never stood a chance. You were doomed to forever be an ant beneath my boot. Zero's tan skin began to turn pale as all the fight just left him. His fighting broke, and compared to the confident killer of before, now he was just hollow. She then brought the man closer to her before putting a finger to his head, eliciting a scream of absolute agony before she stopped and pulled away from the man. Following this, Kasha allowed Zero to stew in his recent pain mixed with his broken dream for a little longer before one of her tails slithered up to the killer's neck and snapped it. His broken body was unceremoniously tossed aside as the life left his eyes. What made this terrifying was that now the inhuman woman was going to focus on someone new with Zero dead. Miss Blanc, I'm certain that we can come to an arrangement that's beneficial to all of us without violence. Noah reasoned in an attempt to sweet-talk his way out of whatever Kasha had in store for all of us. This caused the woman's gaze to immediately focus on him as her golden-slitted eyes glowing in the dim light made her look like an inhuman monster hunting prey. "Seems we have a volunteer," she announced with glee. Noah's eyes widened in fear. Before he could try getting a word in, one of the golden tails shot across the table and wrapped around his neck. Ominously, Noah was slowly reeled out of his chair and across the table's surface, grasping at the tail, choking him in order to free himself. His struggles were in vain as he was brought before Kasha as she put a finger to his head. Then, he began screaming until she finished whatever agony she inflicted upon Noah like she had Zero. Following this, Kasha's tail raised the choking man into the air until it lowered him so that his feet were now touching the ground. "Noah, I see that you really like money, is that right?" Kasha asked with a friendly smile. The golden-furred tail around Noah's loosened so that he could speak. "Yes. I like money." Kasha gave an understanding nod. "You're only in this criminal enterprise for the money. I bet that you'd leave it immediately if you never had to worry about wealth ever again." Noah nodded enthusiastically. "I'd never do criminal work if I never had to worry about money. I'd leave 8 fingers immediately and live happily on my estate for the rest of my life." Was this bastard really going to weasel his way out of this? "Well, it's your lucky day as I feel like being a merciful goddess to you. I'll let you live, I'll even give you all the gold that you could ever need in your life," Kasha said, reassuring Noah. "Would you like that?" "Yes. Thank you. I promise, I'll make certain to pray to you and the 4 great gods every day for the rest of my life as thanks for your mercy." Noah swore with a smile. Then, he looked around as Kasha still hadn't released him. Additionally, he didn't see any of the gold he was promised. Miss Kasha? Weren't you going to let me go? And you mentioned the gold that you would give me? Yet, I don't see it." Noah questioned. Yet, while he didn't notice what was happening, I did. There, at his feet, I could see the telltale glint of gold slowly rising up his boots. "I am a goddess of her word. I am going to let you go. As for your gold, just look down." She answered and pointed her finger to Noah's feet. When he followed where she was pointing, Noah looked down to see what seemed to be a golden shell forming over his feet that was steadily rising to his shins. "What is this? You said that you would let me go and give me all the gold I'd ever need in my life," Noah cried out as his heavy golden boots scraped against the ground while he tried to free himself. With a mocking smile, Kasha patted him on the cheek. "I never lied to you. I promised to let you go, and I will after I've finished giving you your gift that was so readily agreed to. As for your gold, I promised that I'd give you enough to last the rest of your life. I'll leave you some air holes, but other than that, the human body typically dies after 3 days without water. All of that gold is more than enough to make sure you live out the rest of your life surrounded by what you love." The blood drained from Noah's face as he heard this, making him struggle harder as his feet thudded against the floor. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Don't do this to me." I noted that the growing golden prison was now speeding up as it covered past his knees, forcing his left leg to remain mid-kick while his right was stuck to the ground. "But we already made our bargain. I'm being very generous and giving you everything that you wanted." The gold sped up and was now at his waist. "I'd inhale if I were you since you need all the breathing room you can get." With wide eyes, Noah did just that as the gold went up his torso. "We can make a new deal. I have so much to offer." Noah bargained further while he still could. "Noah, that isn't how this works," Kasha said with a tisk. "Besides, as one whose life has consisted of conning people, You should have really paid attention to what you agreed to. Noah's chest was completely covered as his arms were locked into place. Before he could say another word, the gold had grown to cover his mouth, muffling any further words as it continued rising. I saw Noah's eyes look at me one last time in terror before they were covered over by a metal exterior. In a few more moments, Noah's hair disappeared under his new prison until all that was left was a humanoid golden statue. Yet, even covered, the few air holes that Kasha put into the statue allowed for his muffled screaming to come out. Once finished, the monstrous goddess let Noah and his prison fall the ground. She had conned the conman. Then, she seemed to blink away from where she'd been sitting until I heard a screaming coming from Raglin. Looking over, I saw Kasha with her finger against the man's forehead and her tails wrapped around his body. When she pulled her hand away, she bent over to meet the smuggler's eyes. "You seem to like smuggling slaves across borders." When she said this, I could innately tell that Raglin was not going to survive this, nor would his death be pleasant. "You're also a gambling man. Up to try your luck?" Raglin froze for a moment before making up his mind on if he should play whatever sadistic game that Kasha might conjure up. "Will I live if I do?" He glanced over to the statue containing Noah, "And not in horrid punishment if I do win?" "Of course. If you win this game, I'll let you go free to do whatever you wish with your life. I won't go back on any deal made with me." "Then I'll do it." Kasha's smile grew wider as more of her tail shot out and wrapped around his limbs as they forced him into a curling position. "What is this? What game am I supposed to be playing?" A small wooden crate reinforced with a metallic interior appeared next to the inhuman woman. "The game is going to be survival. I'll have you smuggled on the normal route that you've had to smuggle your slaves, there and back. You'll receive all the accommodations that you provided to them. Food and water every few days, a little opening at the bottom of your crate to remove any waste, almost no protection from the heat and cold." Raglin shook his head. "No, this is impossible. I'll never make it." While saying this, Kasha's tails ripped off his clothing until he was only left in small clothes. "If it's good enough for slaves, it's good enough for you. Just think of it as a little trip you have to take before you are free." With that said, Kasha shoved Raglin into the crate while a conjured lid appeared on top of it. Raglin banged the inside of the small crate, barely enough to move his arms and legs, while his muffled screaming could be heard, begging for freedom. Another golden tail pushed the crate away, hard enough to slide across the floor until it came to a stop after banging into Noah's prison. Muffled screams came from both prisons after making contact. But with Raglin now dealt with, that only left me for Kasha to deal with, and she knew it. I watched her slowly saunter over to me, each second drawing out more of my fear. Some might consider her movements to be enticing, but I knew that she was taunting me as she finally stood before me. I hadn't moved from my seat since this started as I was too afraid to find out what might happen if I were to do so. Amazingly, I managed to find my voice. "Why are you here? What could we have done to anger this woman so?" "Because your group touched my daughter, along with all the other lives that it has ruined over the years. Did you really think that there might not be any consequences for your actions?" When she said this, her finger stuck out and touched my forehead, not even bothering to remove my hood to find out my identity, making me feel like a jagged dagger was being stabbed through my head. I screamed until she finally ceased her torment and I began heavily breathing from the ordeal. Well, I never would have believed that the direct cousin of the king would be the one running a criminal empire. My eyes widened as I realized what she had just done. Kasha went through my memories. "You don't understand. Everything that I and my father have done had been to remove the crown from Ramposa's family and put it into the hands of someone more competent. He and his father have run the re-estais into the ground," I shouted in frustration to the woman. This only received laughter from Kasha. "You're being serious, right?" she questioned with more laughter, filling me with anger. "Of course I'm serious," I responded. "So, let's get this straight. You and your father both helped to aid and lead a criminal empire within the re-estais so that they could make things shitty enough for you to declare the king incompetent, be declared king, or have his heirs declared king, kill the heirs, and then become king. And then, you assume that you could magically fix all the problems plaguing the kingdom, most of which you and your father have had a hand in making, without issue? There's being delusional, and then there's the absolute lunacy that you have imagined. She continued laughing while patting me on the shoulder. Each pat made me more and more nervous on what she'd do next. The laugh you gave me almost makes me not want to punish you. Almost. Then, her expression became deadly serious as she lost the fake smile she had maintained throughout the entire time she got here. But for a royal brat with high aspirations like yours, we need to do something special. I'm going to give you the choice between a fun prison like Noah received, maybe done in platinum instead of gold, or you can accept the terms of a geesh I'll put on you. I think I've heard of that contractual magic before, namely how it was used by rulers of far-off kingdoms to enforce treaties. I could have myself bound to whatever magical contract this woman might create, or I could find myself in a metal prison like Noah, waiting to die of starvation or thirst. I'll agree to the geesh, I said immediately. Good choice. It's a lot more fun than just copying a previous punishment I gave someone, Kasha said in a teasing tone. Under the contract of geesh, you will follow every order I give until death. Do you agree? Yes. A moment later, I felt the spell sink into my body, making me understand that I was fully enslaved to the whims of this goddess. Now, sit in your chair as if it were the royal throne and don't move. I found my body move without any choice in the matter as I sat properly with my back against the chair and my arms on the rests. For one with aspirations to become king, let's give you a proper throne to fit that position. Moments later, I felt my chair shifting as the wood turned to gold encrusted with jewels. The armrests of my chair then began growing over my forearms until they had become merged with the chair. I could feel the same happen to my feet. Now, the only way I could ever come off this throne was by losing my arms and legs. Next, you'll need a crown. As soon as she said that, I felt a heavy weight on my head while what felt like a vice was wrapped around the top of my head. Finally, a scepter to wave about the court, I saw the gold of my armrest shift as my hand trapped inside the gold was forced to turn before gripping something. Then, a scepter started growing until it reached the height of my eyes. What are you doing to me? I asked with fear evident in my tone. Preparing you for your royal attendance at court. What did she mean by that? She wasn't seriously planning to send me out in public like this? And done. She announced before a reflective mirror appeared in front of me. I got a horrific look at the crown that Kasha had put on me, a garish piece of gold and jewels that was so tightly bound to my head that I'd likely be horrifically injured from attempting to remove it. Carved above my throne was written King 8 Fingers, which I was able to decipher backwards after a few moments. By the gods, she was going to show me out in public. For your order, I'm going to send you to court. There, you will only say that the goddess known as the Fox Princess has sent you. You'll not make any further mention of my identity than that. Following this, you will announce yourself as King 8 Fingers and then explain everything about your criminal empire along with your reasons for doing it. Additionally, you will only refer to yourself as King 8 Fingers. I was going to be executed. Please, there has to be another way. King 8 Fingers can't be sent to court. Please, don't make King 8 Fingers do this. With horror, I realized how much she had me change my vocabulary with that order. Yet, I couldn't move or try to look at her as Kasha's first order was that I remain seated like I would in a royal throne and not move. Instead, I looked straight ahead and watched from my peripheral vision as a dark portal opened next to where I forcibly sat, leading off to the one place I suspected but was terrified to be sent to. My mockery of a throne was soon turned so that I fully faced the portal to my doom. King 8 Fingers is willing to do anything if you don't do this. I pleaded, even if I already knew that Kasha wouldn't be swayed. Have fun, King 8 Fingers, Kasha said cheerfully before sliding my throne, along with myself, across the floor and into the darkness of the portal as I screamed. A moment later, and I was now in the brightly lit throne room of the Re-Esti's kingdom in the midst of its courtly session. I looked upon Ramposa, his family, and the multiple other lords and ladies of the court as they all gazed at me with confusion and shock. In addition, I saw multiple guards who had pulled their spears out, ready for some threat until they saw my imprisoned form on this throne. Normally, I might have found myself absolutely frozen in terror, but I wasn't given such a reprieve as Kasha's order took control of my body and I began to speak.